What are we talking about? Practice? We're talking about practice, man.
This is UnCleated with Garrett Gibbs and Jason Bishop.
In my opinion, that sucked.
We failed to make our coaching points and our points more compelling than their fat little girlfriend.
Oh my God, did he really just say that?
UnCleated, what you know. Jason Bishop, Garrett Gibbs sitting in with us this week. Tyler Mitchell on the Bishop Media Sports Network. We got a lot to get into today. We're going to talk the Dolphins bullying situation. We're going to get into our Super Bowl predictions. We're going to discuss the moves that the Braves need to make in the offseason. We're also going to take a look at the Oregon-Stanford game. Is Stanford I guess, a legitimate title contender? And who is our pick to win the Heisman Trophy? Before we get into it, guys, I think there was a Toby Keith concert that was here this weekend, and I think all three of us were there. It really wasn't much of a concert, as we all ended up pretty much sitting in the back because we all got there late. It was almost like listening to the concert on the radio.
If you didn't have a top set of binoculars, then you wasn't seeing a whole lot from where we were.
The CD sounded really good, though.
The CD sounded really good. Well, let's go ahead and get into it. The Dolphins bullying situation, Incognito and Jonathan Martin. Garrett, I think we're going to kind of let you kick things off with this and give us your thoughts on what that crazy situation is.
Well, look, I'll tell you, man. I don't know all of the particulars about the situation, nor do I really care. I think this is a situation where you have political correctness getting involved here. And this is a trend going throughout America from little kids all the way up to grown men. Okay, and there's no telling what goes on in those locker rooms behind closed doors with the players, with the players' wives, with the coaches, there's football is definitely a grown man's game, and I think if I don't know what all happened. Like I said, I don't know that anybody will ever know. But I think at some point this is a tough man's game, and if you can't take a little bit of ridicule, then you don't need to be playing at all. Period.
Here's the thing with me: professional athletes, especially NFL players, they're all alpha males. Every single one of them.
Right.
They've been alpha males their whole career up to the NFL. Typically, in a professional athlete's locker room, again, especially in the NFL, being that they're alpha males throughout, when there are two guys that have problems with one another, for what they're saying is the case here, what typically happens is there's a physical altercation on the field, in the locker room, and then that's the end of it. When one guy's had enough, that's the end of it. That didn't happen in this situation. And so what that says to me is, was it really just only Incognito that was giving Jonathan Martin problems? But and because there wasn't a physical altercation between just the two of them, what that says to me, the answer to that question is no. That there was probably multiple players involved in this that has not even come out yet, and that's why Jonathan Martin and Incognito did not have a quote physical altercation unquote, because there was more to it than just Incognito and Martin.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'd agree with both of your points here. In the NFL, you're going to have this in every locker room. To what extent it is, we do not know. Nowadays, with the social media the way it is, we're going to start seeing a lot of things come out. Your text messages, your voicemails, and it's really going to display maybe the environment in the locker room and kind of what was going on with these folks. As far as how they handled the situation, both of them getting kicked off, one of them leaving, one getting kicked off the team. Really, this is just, it's a mess for the NFL. There's no good way this can turn out, except for maybe shining a little more light, and maybe more coaches will get involved to the extent the hazing goes on. Dinner tabs, to some extent, that's okay. To $40,000, that's not okay. But little things, fisticuffs, get it over with. Let's play some football.
This is kind of the point that I was trying to make, earlier is football. There's a subculture in football that goes along with, a little bit of hazing. I mean, it's been known for 100 years that that rookies or freshmen, or you know the story. I mean, you know the drill that freshmen get hazed, rookies get hazed. It's just the fresh meat. Even in the prisons, they get treated different than the rest of the guys that have been there for years. Okay, and I just think that, you know, if you're gonna, no matter, like Tyler says, I mean, I don't think there's any positive outcome that can come from this, because if you ask the coaches to get involved, or you bring in another third-party group to get involved to manage this kind of stuff, then, I mean, you know, you might as well just quit playing.
The thing is, too, you know, obviously the experience that I have isn't nearly to the level of
Right.
in an NFL locker room. The closest thing I have is a college baseball locker room. That's the closest, but I'm going to do my best to relate that. So my freshman year at Georgia Southern, when I played baseball for the Eagles, these things, not to the extent, but you talked about the freshman hazing. Yeah, carrying other guys' bags, taking the other guys out to dinner, those types of things, and being ridiculed maybe a little more than a sophomore, junior, and especially a senior in my situation. Yeah, you know, those things, they certainly happen. And we had our fair share of altercations in the locker room where a couple of guys, more than a couple of guys, didn't get along, but it was between those two individuals. And then, you know, as I mentioned earlier, physical altercation happened, and then that was the end of it.
Right.
That was it. We moved on.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I feel about Martin leaving the team. And I wonder, and Coach Philbin of the Dolphins says, well, I didn't know anything about it. I have, you know, common sense. You have to almost think that probably before Martin left that he did go to Philbin. Wouldn't you think?
Well, I would think so. I mean, it almost sounds like that this is another Penn State situation. You know?
Yeah, we're really, to me, everything that's come out that we've seen, everything we've heard, to me, for the situation to come out the way it has, there has to be something else that we're not getting. There has to be some more information that will come out further down the line that really pushed Jonathan Martin to say, I'm done. I can't take it anymore. Instead of fighting it, it must have been pretty bad. So I really hate to even talk about it because I just do not have the information to talk about it.
Well, you know, the thing is, you know, Incognito is also, his reputation has come under immense scrutiny through all of this. And, you know, from what we've heard from other professional athletes and some of his college teammates that have played with him, nobody really likes the guy. You know, he's been deemed a dirty player
By NFL players.
By other NFL players, and Jonathan Martin's not the first person that hasn't gotten along with this guy. Does it warrant Jonathan Martin leaving the football team over? Tyler, you mentioned, I can't answer it. I don't know what was going on in the locker room.
Well, and you don't know what's going on in his head.
Yeah,
you don't know, you know.
And we've heard several other professional athletes, former NFL guys, that have stepped up and said, yeah, you know, these things go on. And they've also then thrown in that little disclaimer, but not from what I'm seeing what's happening in the Dolphins locker room. They all say, you know, that's foreign territory. We never saw that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know.
Well, I think that's, you know, trying to dodge the bullet a little bit. I think that this isn't the first case that's happened. But you know, you mentioned it earlier, Jason, that these guys, you know, there'd be a physical altercation or not. I mean, but they would handle it in-house.
Yeah.
Get it over with. Bam, be done with it. And see, and I think with this situation here, you're opening the door to bring in some more form of government, like the referees are not enough a big enough governing body over the NFL, and not to mention the NFL themselves, how they govern the NFL, the players, and you know, I don't see where more control is going to end up being better.
Yeah, well, that's going to happen. Go ahead, Tyler.
And I would say, you know, at some point it would come to it would all come to a head, obviously, but it would come to the point where the veterans on the team would have to step in. And from the looks of it, the Dolphins really don't have that veteran presence. You know, it's going to be Incognito and his buddies. And if they're the ones trying to slow the reins on the hazing or stop the situation, I mean, obviously they didn't do it.
Well, I mean, you know, you mentioned veterans. I mean, guys like Cameron Wake, who are you know, all-pro style players. I mean, and, you know, he's been there for 4, 5, 6 years, and you would think, if it's for the betterment of the team, best interest of the team, I would think that he would step up and.
30 seconds, we got to get out. And off the top of your head, who would you say would be the leader of the Dolphins locker room? Give me a name.
I said it. I think Cameron Wake.
Cameron Wake?
From the looks of it, they don't have a leader.
I'm with you, Tyler. I don't think there is a guy. And 10 seconds, we got to get out. One thing I'll say is if I'm the type of person that if I'm Jonathan Martin, Cognita and I are getting into a fight.
Period.
End of discussion. Yep. We got to get out. This is UnCleated on the Bishop Media Sports Network.
When Heron Document Systems opened, a connected copier meant it was simply plugged into the wall. Well, things have changed. 30 years later, the copier is the focal point of document workflow. It's not just the printer, fax, and scanner. It's much more. In the medical office, it's integrating patient information with their electronic medical records. In the legal office, it's performing OCR, Bates stamping, and tracking expense for client billing. All of these changes over the past 30 years, and Heron Document Systems is still here. Still, providing your business with the best solution for your document and workflow pains. Every business experiences those pains, and that's okay. With Heron Document Systems, there is a better solution. Visit heronds.com for more information. Heron Document Systems in Brunswick, the efficient solution for your business.
Magic 105.9 presents the Southern Sports Edition Minute with Jason Bishop, the authority on Southern sports.
This Southern Sports Edition Minute is brought to you by Island Automotive. The high school football regular season came to an end Friday night, and with it, so did Brunswick's and MCA season. Brunswick lost the finale to Tiff 48-32, and MCA went down to Benedictine 56-0. Frederica was also on the losing end to Robert Toombs Christian 42-7. The Knights will be the number 2 seed and will host DEA next week in the Jungle. Glenn won their finale against Jenkins 41-20 and will be a 3 seed. The Terrors will be on the road against the 2nd seed from Region 1, which is yet to be determined. This has been your Southern Sports Edition Minute, brought to you by Island Automotive.
Pick up your copy of SSE all over the Golden Isles. The Southern Sports Edition Minute with Jason Bishop, exclusively on Magic 105.9.
Welcome back, UnCleated. Garrett Gibbs, Jason Bishop, and sitting in with us today, Tyler Mitchell on the Bishop Media Sports Network. So here we are. We're about halfway through the NFL season, over halfway actually, and I think there are several teams that might be surprises to us and that we would consider Super Bowl contenders. So, I get into our Super Bowl picks. If the season ended today, with where everybody's at, who we got, Garrett?
Well, I mean, I think in the NFC, it's standing out pretty good. I think the Seattle is clearly the front runner. You'd have to say, it was going to come out of, the NFC West is a lot stronger here in the last couple of years than they have been in decades, man. And the 49ers with the Alden Smith problems that they've had, I think that's kind of weakened their defense. They've been a little more vulnerable. Seattle's clearly the best team, I believe, in the entire NFC. It's up to them on how far they go. In the AFC, I mean, you got to have 3 teams. I look at Denver, of course. I mean, with Peyton Manning, and who can stop that offense? All right. I think the biggest surprise on both sides is Kansas City with the addition of Andy Reid and bringing Alex Smith in, and he's not putting up, MVP, all-pro type numbers, but he fits well in that offense. And Andy Reid's done a fantastic job of coaching that team. And what about their defense? I mean, everybody's kind of sleeping on their defense. They're not giving up 10 points a game hardly.
Alex Smith.
I love it.
Alex Smith has been really the key. He's not making mistakes, and he's not screwing up, and he's managing the games
but that's
better.
been his MO for his whole career.
Right. UnCleated on the Bishop Media Sports Network. Garrett Gibbs, Jason Bishop, Tyler Mitchell. Yeah, he did that in San Francisco, and the only reason that he lost a job in San Francisco is because he got hurt, and then there was a guy that was physically better, and that's why he had to move on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, Kaepernick's got a fantastic arm. And I think the other surprise is out of the AFC and still in the hunt is New England Patriots. I mean, as long as they have Bill Belichick, Tom Brady at the helm, not with the return of Rob Gronkowski, you can't sell these guys short. Their defense is struggling a little bit this year. They've given up 20, 30 points in a couple of games, and that's uncharacteristic like for them guys. But they're also they can put up 50 with Gronk in the lineup. So and now that the New York Giants are clearly not going to make the playoffs, I think it's safe to say that New England. I think it's safe to say that New England might have a shot because they've been their nemesis.
There is some insight right there for you. You're not going to get anywhere else. New York Giants are making the playoffs.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, the Giants and the Falcons will not be in the playoffs.
There you go. Uncleated on the Bishop Media Sports Network. Garrett Gibbs, Jason Bishop, Tyler Mitchell. Tyler, we heard what Garrett's got to say.
Well, I'll hit on a couple points he made. Kansas City, which, I hate to say it now because nobody's going to believe me. They've kind of been my pick all year. Alex Smith doesn't make mistakes. He's just a solid quarterback.
Been his pick all year.
It's been my pick.
That's what I thought, too. It's been pick all year.
My friends at work, they were giving me grief about this all year. It's not going to happen. Alex Smith's not, whatever. It's happening right now. We're seeing it. But another thing is the defense. Nobody really saw this coming. They haven't given up more than 17 points all year. That said, the Broncos, they score a lot. They scored 35-plus points every single game. We're going to see these two teams face off in 2 weeks, I believe. These are my two AFC picks, so it's really going to determine.
But you can only make one AFC pick.
And
that's the thing.
My one would be Kansas City.
Kansas City?
But it's going to be very telling 2 weeks from now when they play each other. We're going to see what's going to give the defense or the offense.
Okay, so you're picking Kansas City to win the whole thing?
I'm picking Kansas City to win the whole thing. It's going to be tough. As he said, the Seahawks are a dominating team with one of my favorite players, Richard Sherman, the best cornerback in the league. They're going to be really tough to beat. They have a great quarterback and a great running game, but that defense is pretty incredible, too.
Okay, so Tyler's taking Kansas City. Garrett, you're taking Seattle. Is that what I heard you say?
I'm going to say Seattle.
Okay,
yes.
I'm going to cheat a little bit. Because I put in the research, so I'm going to cheat you guys out of this. So I picked an AFC winner and an NFC winner, and then I actually went through contenders. You mentioned New England. You look at their resume; they've got wins over the Jets, the Saints, and the Dolphins. Pretty impressive, not too bad. Indianapolis has beaten San Francisco. They've beaten Seattle. They've beaten Denver. Those are three very impressive wins.
Very much.
Kansas City has beaten Dallas, Philadelphia, Tennessee, and the Browns. Denver, who I think we all kind of like pretty well.
They're solid.
Their wins, their best wins, Philadelphia, Dallas, and Washington. Those are three best wins. So in the AFC...
Those were close wins, too.
Yeah. In the AFC, you look at what Indianapolis has done, San Francisco, Seattle, and Denver. Indianapolis is my pick from the AFC, and I've got them playing... Well, I'll tell you who I got them playing in a minute. Detroit, I'm putting them in my NFC Super Bowl contenders. Okay, great. I'm glad we're in agreement. They've beaten the Bears, the Browns, the Cowboys, and the Redskins. Pretty impressive. San Francisco's beaten. They've beaten Green Bay and they've beaten Tennessee. It's really not all that impressive to me. Seattle has beaten Carolina, San Francisco, and Tennessee, who's doing really well. And then New Orleans, Chicago, and Miami, to me, that's the most unimpressive resume, as well as New Orleans has losses to New England and the Jets. So, here we go. Seattle and Indianapolis is who I have in the Super Bowl.
And don't forget, Kansas City, to back up your point, Kansas City still has to play Denver twice. Right.
It's going to be very telling what happens when they play Denver. Denver... Their opponents are third in the league at rushing. So, Kansas City just so happens to have a really good running back in Jamal Charles.
The thing is, I still don't know if I want to hitch my wagon to Peyton Manning in the playoffs because he hasn't won those big playoff games. So I'm not real sure if I'm that sold on Denver yet.
Well, he also hasn't started a season throwing 20-something touchdowns and no interceptions. So, you can definitely argue the point that, each year stands alone.
Well, I agree with you. I kind of have to agree with you a little bit, Tyler, because... I've always heard my whole entire life that, especially in the NFL, you have to have a running game and a defense to win championships. Okay? New England has completely taken that. They've just disproved that time and time again because you can't tell me when they've ever had a 1,000-yard rusher.
I can't recall.
Okay,
Any
now
run.
their early runs when they won Super Bowls, yeah, they had a good defense, but their passing game is their running game. I mean, these guys just do it so unorthodox, and they've proved me wrong so many times in the past. I can't sleep on them guys.
Okay, you're not sleeping on them, but you're not taking them.
I'm not going to take them, but I think
you're
do make the
sticking with
playoffs,
Seattle,
and I think they go deep. They do go deep in the playoffs.
Okay, you're listening to Uncleated on the Bishop Media Sports Network. Tyler Mitchell, Garrett Gibbs, Jason Bishop. Tyler, you're sold on Kansas City.
You know, I'm sold on Kansas City. They do not give up a lot of points. They have a good running game, and their quarterback does not make mistakes. That is a recipe for winning in the playoffs.
Especially when you get it, yeah, like you said, especially when you get in the playoffs. Minimize your mistakes, and you're going to find yourself in a lot of situations to win football games. Okay, so I guess I've got to make a pick since you guys made picks. I've told you who I've got in the game.
All right.
I'm Indianapolis, Seattle, and I'm taking the Seahawks, and we're up against a hard break, so we got to get out. Up next, what do the Braves need to do in their offseason? This is Uncleated on the Bishop Media Sports Network.
Magic 105.9 presents the Southern Sports Edition Minute with Jason Bishop, the authority on Southern sports.
This Southern Sports Edition Minute is brought to you by Island Automotive. The high school football regular season came to an end Friday night, and with it, so did Brunswick's and MCA season. Brunswick lost the finale to Tiff 48-32, and MCA went down to Benedictine 56-0. Frederica was also on the losing end to Robert Toombs Christian 42-7. The Knights will be the number 2 seed and will host DEA next week in the Jungle. Glenn won their finale against Jenkins 41-20 and will be a 3 seed. The Terrors will be on the road against the 2nd seed from Region 1, which is yet to be determined. This has been your Southern Sports Edition Minute, brought to you by Island Automotive.
Pick up your copy of SSE all over the Golden Isles. The Southern Sports Edition Minute with Jason Bishop, exclusively on Magic 105.9.
When Heron Document Systems opened, a connected copier meant it was simply plugged into the wall. Well, things have changed. 30 years later, the copier is the focal point of document workflow. It's not just the printer, fax, and scanner. It's much more. In the medical office, it's integrating patient information with their electronic medical records. In the legal office, it's performing OCR, Bates stamping, and tracking expense for client billing. All of these changes over the past 30 years, and Heron Document Systems is still here. Still, providing your business with the best solution for your document and workflow pains. Every business experiences those pains, and that's okay. With Heron Document Systems, there is a better solution. Visit heronds.com for more information. Heron Document Systems in Brunswick, the efficient solution for your business.
Welcome back, Uncleated. Tyler Mitchell, Garrett Gibbs. The Atlanta Braves, another early round, another early exit in the playoffs for Atlanta seems to be a common trend. I don't think they've won a playoff series now dating all the way back to 2005. So we're several years into it now. So this team, to me, struck out way too much.
Yes.
And didn't have that elite, reliable starter at the top end of their rotation. Yeah, I felt like they had a lot of depth, but when it got into playoffs and you're getting
need experience.
When you're getting one hit, 2 hit, and you're scoring maybe a run, and you didn't have a guy to counter, I think it really hurt them.
I think it did. Like we said a couple shows back that they're, leading into the playoffs that their starting rotation was going to be their problem. And I think, even when they sent Medlin out, I mean, he ended up having a 5-run hole that they had to come back from. And it's just, in the playoffs, it's just, I've said it before, that it's a whole nother season when the playoffs start. It's a whole nother season. I mean, every run, every error, everything is just so magnified in the playoffs. I mean, one run is like scoring 3 in the regular season.
Teller, you said earlier you felt like the Braves needed more experience in their pitching staff. I want to pose a question to you. I know Tim Hudson was out, but even if the Braves had Tim Hudson, do you think it really would have made all that much of a difference?
To tell you the truth, I really don't think it would have made a huge difference.
I don't either.
Just his leadership, it's hard for him to lead as much as he could from the bench. Instead, Tim being Tim, going out there, the gamer that he is, that could have really helped, amp us up for the playoffs. That said, we were just outmatched. I mean,
the Dodgers outpitched us.
We got outpitched. We were facing some of the best pitchers in baseball. I mean, Clayton Kershaw. We need a Clayton Kershaw.
Agreed.
We need a flamethrower, somebody that you can go out there and he's just going to sit them down and make them walk right back to the dugout.
Should that be the top priority for the Braves? Their number one thing to get done is, should it be to find an elite starter?
Yes.
Garrett?
Without a doubt.
I think so. And I think if you, which I noticed we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but if you let McCann go, okay, you don't re-sign McCann, you let him go to free agency, I think that frees up some cap space where you can bring in a $10 million a year starter.
So who's available? We all know David Price is on the market.
Right.
I think that should be the number one target.
I agree with you completely. David Price is the exact type of pitcher I'm talking about. He's a flamethrower. He can go down and totally beat down their morale, and at the same time bring us up. He's a very enthusiastic pitcher, and he has a lot of fire to him. And I love the guy. I think
he's still young too, and that's a big thing too.
And he's a lefty.
He's going to require a pretty hefty salary because he's going to be by far the best pitcher on the free agent market.
I believe he was getting paid around $10 million last year.
He's probably going to get paid more than that.
I'm okay with paying him a little more. Granted, I'm not the one writing the check, but I think it'd be worth the investment to have a pitcher like him leading the clubhouse.
But yeah, I mean, you bring a guy in like that. I mean, you're coming off a year where Wainwright just signed a deal where he's making $19 million a year. I think David Price has an argument to be in that ballpark. I think between 15 and 20 million a year is what you're going to look at.
Can the Braves pay that?
You know what? I don't know that they can. I think you got O'Flaherty, you got Downs. They're going to be losing a couple of players to free agency if they choose not to re-sign them. And don't forget you have Hayward, Medlin, guys like that are open for arbitration.
Freeman.
So they're either going to bounce or either they're going to get more money. So I don't think the Braves can afford it.
UnCleated on the Bishop Media Sports Network. Garrett Gibbs, Jason Bishop, Tyler Mitchell. Tyler, can the Braves afford him?
Can the Braves afford to win playoff games? Can we afford to keep losing playoff games is the question. You tell me, what's the dollar amount on that? Is it $15 million? I would write the check.
Well, to your point, there's obviously going to be an overhaul. Garrett mentioned earlier in the segment that Brian McCann was probably going to be out the door. Now, the Braves did offer him a one-year deal, I think worth around $14 million, where I don't think that's going to hold up.
No.
I think McCann and his group they're probably going to be looking for a long-term deal. I've seen reports that he's going to be upwards of $100 million, and of course Atlanta's not going to be in the running for that.
We're not going to foot that bill, I wouldn't imagine.
So, I mean, and you don't forget. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, you have some arbitration eligible players. Craig Kimbrell is one of them. All right, and you do not want to let that guy go.
You have to lock up Kimbrell,
and he's already making upwards of $8 million a year. So, he's probably going to end up getting 12 to 13. He's going to, I don't know. He might do a Chipper Jones and decide to, take a little less salary to keep the team together, which I think is great.
We do have a lot of Atlanta-born, Atlanta area-born players. Maybe they could bite the bullet a little bit.
McCann is one of them.
McCann, Hayward, all these guys. I would love. He's a Henry County fellow, Hayward. I would love to see him stick around Atlanta. I mean, he obviously loves Atlanta. His brother's growing up in Atlanta.
If money wasn't an issue, who would you rather have playing catcher, Brian McCann or Evan Gattis?
Silence.
I
don't really see a correct answer there.
I think it's a coin flip. Given the season.
At this point in McCann's career, which I still think he's an all-star. But that said, I think Gattis could very well make a name for himself. I mean, he's nothing to scoff at.
I think Gattis has already made the name for himself.
And I think Gattis has the potential to be an elite catcher. He's a good bit younger than McCann, so he doesn't have the wear and tear that McCann has on his body. Plus, Gattis, this is his first year playing in forever, because remember, he just gave it up. So where McCann was putting all those years by the time that he was 26 on the wear and tear on his body, Gattis doesn't have that wear and tear.
Right.
So I think I'd let McCann walk. I'd sign Gattis, and then I'd figure out something to do in the outfield. B.J. Upton
was atrocious.
He was terrible. He was terrible. You got to get something done in the outfield, and you got to figure out a way to get Jordan Schaefer in your lineup and hit him leadoff, and let Hayward get down the order and be a run producer, because that's what he is.
I agree, and a lot of people might not like this. B.J. Upton, he definitely wouldn't like what I'm about to say, but I think Hayward should be full-time center field starter. Period. He covers so much ground in center field. It's incredible.
The thing that's been running through the rumor mill a lot is the second base position. Of course, Dan Uggla didn't have a very good year last year, and the year before was subpar as well. And there's been all sorts of rumors. I think we've heard Ian Kinsler's name mentioned. We've heard possible trade for Brandon Phillips, and Omar Infante's name has come up. Right. So if you're Frank Wren, and you've got Dan Uggla under contract, what moves do you deal him? And if you do, where do you send him, and who do you got to get back for him?
Well, I think you got him locked up through 2015. You're going to end up paying him $26 million over the next 2 seasons.
2 seasons.
Okay,
right.
2 seasons.
Yeah.
So $13 million a year. Who's going to take him after coming off a season batting $179?
His value is very low.
But I will say, I mean, a lot of people look at just the average, but I look at the, he batted $180, but he had 22 home runs. There was a lot of guys that batted, in the upper twos that didn't have 22 home runs. So what that tells me is when he does get a hit, he's taking it yard.
UnCleated on the Bishop Media Sports Network. Tyler Mitchell, Jason Bishop, Garrett Gibbs. When Atlanta made the acquisition or the trade, or when the trade for Dan Uggla, they made the trade for the home runs. They didn't make the trade for him to hit 300. They knew what they were getting. They knew that he was going to hit 220, 230, at best 240, but they wanted the home runs. That's the reason you got him. And he's continued to produce the power numbers. Now, granted, his power numbers were a little lower than what they had been this season. If Tyler, I see you clamoring a bit. One last thought, and I'll hand it over to you. If I'm Frank Wren, and I have Dan Uggla under contract, the only scenario that I think that I let him go or get him off the team is if I can swap him straight up for Brandon Phillips from Cincinnati. Other than that, I bring him back. I'd give him the opportunity to turn it around. Hell, hit 230 for me and hit 30 home runs. I'm good.
Yeah.
Of course you'd be good. 230, that's 50 points better than he batted last year. Who wouldn't be good? Hey, if they just bat 50 points better than they did the year before, I'll sign them. You cannot even fathom that could possibly happen. You could think maybe he can bat over. If he bats over 200, I'd be just the fact that I'm saying these words, if he bats over 200, makes me sick to my stomach. This guy should not be on a Major League Baseball team with a 180 batting average. Okay, I will give you some slack on the 20 home runs. He can go somewhere. I don't think it's going to be the Braves. I think we're going to eat a large portion of that salary, of that $26 million. Even if we freed up $6 million from getting rid of him, that $6 million could be well spent on a good second baseman.
Well, how long has he had the eye problem? Who knows? Who knows? So ever since 2010, his average has consistently dropped off by about 20 points. So I say give him another chance.
All right, well, we got to get out. We can do this all day if you let us. When we get back, is Stanford a national title contender? UnCleated on the Bishop Media Sports Network.
When Heron Document Systems opened, a connected copier meant it was simply plugged into the wall. Well, things have changed. 30 years later, the copier is the focal point of document workflow. It's not just the printer, fax, and scanner. It's much more. In the medical office, it's integrating patient information with their electronic medical records. In the legal office, it's performing OCR, Bates stamping, and tracking expense for client billing. All of these changes over the past 30 years, and Heron Document Systems is still here. Still, providing your business with the best solution for your document and workflow pains. Every business experiences those pains, and that's okay. With Heron Document Systems, there is a better solution. Visit HeronDS.com for more information. Heron Document Systems in Brunswick, the efficient solution for your business.
Magic 105.9 presents the Southern Sports Edition Minute with Jason Bishop, the authority on Southern sports.
This Southern Sports Edition Minute is brought to you by Island Automotive. The high school football regular season came to an end Friday night, and with it, so did Brunswick's and MCA season. Brunswick lost the finale to Tiff 48-32, and MCA went down to Benedictine 56-0. Frederica was also on the losing end to Robert Toombs Christian 42-7. The Knights will be the number 2 seed and will host DEA next week in the Jungle. Glenn won their finale against Jenkins 41-20 and will be a 3 seed. The Terrors will be on the road against the 2nd seed from Region 1, which is yet to be determined. This has been your Southern Sports Edition Minute, brought to you by Island Automotive.
Pick up your copy of SSE all over the Golden Isles. The Southern Sports Edition Minute with Jason Bishop, exclusively on Magic 105.9.
UnCleated here on the Bishop Media Sports Network. Jason Bishop, Garrett Gibbs, Tyler Mitchell. So Oregon pulled an Oregon this past week. I don't think there was anybody in their right mind, and that includes the ESPN people, that should have been picking Oregon. But all I heard from the ESPN folks, which is it makes me proud that I actually never did sign on the dotted line with those folks, because all we heard was how Oregon not only was going to win, but beat Stanford convincingly. And the whole time I'm sitting there looking at this, I'm like, what games have y'all been watching? Because it's not Oregon-Stanford games, that's for sure.
Yeah, I turned the game on, and I believe it was sometime in the third quarter, and it was 26-0. And I picked Stanford to win the game. I didn't know it was going to be 26-0. I didn't think a shutout was even possible, even through the first 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah,
I agree.
But late in the game, it's 26-0, and I'm like, wow, I just can't believe what I'm watching. And it ended up, they still almost pulled it out because of a couple of mistakes by Stanford, and blocked field goal, and then I believe they had a fumble. But the score ended up being 26-20, and the game, to me, was not that close.
Right. UnCleated on the Bishop Media Sports Network, Garrett Gibbs, Tyler Mitchell, Jason Bishop. Garrett, you said something that really should have stood out to our viewers. Folks, that high-powered Oregon offense that we've heard nothing about, it was 26-0 in the fourth quarter.
0 points.
They had not even scored until the fourth quarter. So what that tells me is, should they have been ranked as highly as they haven't played anybody? Should they have been ranked as highly as they were? No, absolutely not. So now it begs the question: you've got a one-loss Stanford team. Garrett and I have talked about this in the past. I think that we both feel that Stanford is the closest thing to an SEC team outside of the SEC.
Right.
So Stanford's a one-loss team. If they win out, should they be considered a national championship contender, maybe over an undefeated Florida State, whose resume is not going to be that impressive, maybe over an undefeated Ohio State, whose resume is not going to be that impressive?
No. I'll say no. I'll say it. I believe FSU has really gone out and shown us that they're a top 2 team. I mean, they've come out day in and day out and put up ridiculous numbers. They have a really good quarterback that debatably is a Heisman candidate. They come out and score tons and tons of points, and they played a couple good teams this year. I think you would know better than I, but I believe they played Miami and Clemson, which 2 really good teams, and I'm pretty sure Clemson didn't make it out of the clubhouse. Did they show up for that game?
No, they did not.
Okay, they didn't. Okay.
All right, so you say that Florida State's got those 2 impressive wins. I'm gonna argue with you and play devil's advocate. Stanford has beaten Arizona State. They've beaten Washington, UCLA, Oregon State, and now Oregon. They still have Notre Dame left on their schedule, so they'll probably beat them. And then in the Pac-12 title game, they're going to have a rematch with UCLA or Arizona State. So if they win out through that, how can you make the argument that Florida State's wins by themselves? Who they beat, sure. The overall resume, not even close.
Well, I'll say this: out of all the people that Stanford has beaten, do you think any of those teams that you were saying were good games could have beaten Clemson?
I think Oregon can. Yeah, I think Oregon would beat Clemson. Garrett?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would it'd be a better game than the Stanford-Oregon game, I think.
It would be a better game. I'll give that to you.
Yeah. Well, the other folks that are in this discussion, obviously, you've got Ohio State. So I was looking at key wins. Looking at resume. This is if
Body
they
of
win
work.
out. If they win out, Ohio State would have beaten Wisconsin, Northwestern, Michigan, and then probably would have to go through Michigan State in the Big 12 championship game. I think that would be their most impressive win is Michigan State.
Right.
Florida State, their wins over Clemson, Miami, they'd have to beat Florida. And I want you to pay very close attention to this because this is probably going to be the only time, it's the first time in my lifetime I've had an opportunity to say this. If Florida State gets to the ACC championship game, odds are the team that they would have to beat is Duke.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough game.
Wow.
Yeah.
For Duke.
Duke, Florida State is likely going to be your ACC championship game. And then
And this isn't basketball we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
So, that's where we are, and I think we're all in agreement Alabama should be there, right? If Alabama wins out, we're there.
Even if they didn't win out, I think they should be there. Which, I'm not saying they won't win out, because they will. But I agree, they should absolutely be there.
Just a little bit off topic, but as far as Alabama winning out, watch the Auburn game, folks, because that one right there is going to be the slip-up if there is one.
UnCleated on the Bishop Media Sports Network. Tyler Mitchell, Garrett Gibbs, Jason Bishop. I'm in agreement. I think Alabama, with their resume, the teams they've beaten, if they win out, they deserve to be there. I think a very good argument can be made, even if they slip up, maybe in the SEC championship game, that they might still belong there. I'm sorry, but if it comes down to it, I think that probably the consensus is if Florida State wins out, they're going to be there. I think that because of the quality of wins, not necessarily as many as they've had.
Haven't really been that close.
Yeah, and it hasn't been that close. It's a very good point, Tyler. So I think Florida State's going to be there. So I think they're going to go undefeated. I see Alabama, Florida State playing for it. But I'm going to make this point about Stanford. If Florida State does slip up somewhere, I think you have to have Stanford in over an undefeated Ohio State. Hell, even in over an undefeated Baylor. Because their schedule and their resume is much better.
I think they're a better team than both of those guys, to be honest. Stanford has a solid team. They're great at ball control. They run the ball well, and they don't commit a lot of penalties. That's a good team.
They don't turn it over. And we've said this in previous shows, Jason, that Stanford is the most SEC-like team outside of the SEC.
Take wins. Right. Really quick. Take wins and losses out of it. Give me your top 3 teams in the country. Wins and losses not entering into the equation. In your mind, the 3 best teams:
Alabama, Florida State, Stanford.
Tyler?
And I would have to just, unfortunately, 100% agree with him on that.
Okay, I'm going to go Alabama, Stanford, Florida State. I think Stanford's better than gosh. I know how crazy that sounds, but I just think that with what they showed and what they did to Oregon, just shutting that offense down.
They gave up 20 points in the fourth quarter.
I understand that.
But here's
the game was over by that point.
But here's another point to make is that everybody is focused with FSU, single out Florida State. Everybody's focused on Jameis Winston. Okay, this is another one of those like Kansas City Chiefs situations. Nobody's paying attention to that D.
That defense is nasty.
They struggled against Boston College this year. They gave up 34 against Boston College. The rest of the games hadn't even been close.
And that's kind of to my point. I'm glad you brought that up because I feel like Oregon's offense is better than Florida State's offense, and I watched Stanford shut Oregon down. Right. So do I think that Stanford could shut down Jameis Winston and the Florida State offense? Yes, I do. Therefore, making it a defensive game.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I do think this year I think Florida State has the edge on speed on just about any other team.
They're good, man.
Besides maybe Alabama, they're like the old FSU. If anybody out there remembers them, they were just all over the field. I think they have more speed on defense than they ever had on offense.
That defensive line is nasty.
It's just crazy.
They get through quick.
If Stanford finds a way to get there and Alabama is sitting there waiting, can Stanford beat Alabama?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
But
Alabama, I think, is too deep, and you got Nick Saban. I mean, his game plan.
If the teams are close, I would say Nick Saban gives them the edge. I mean, if you think the teams are debatably close, would give it
and not
Nick
just
Saban.
it starts at the top with Nick Saban, but I think that you got the best ball control, or arguably one of the best game managers in AJ McCarron. I mean, in big games, that's who I want taking my team.
I agree with you 100%. And that said, Stanford does the same thing. They held the ball for 42.5 minutes against Oregon.
But the only thing is that Stanford hasn't, and I would make the case that Oregon, given a matchup playing in a neutral field, Oregon doesn't match up with LSU.
That's a very good point. The thing is, the question was not who's better, because I agree, Alabama's better than Stanford. Right. The question was, can Stanford beat Alabama? My answer is yes.
I think they can. I think Ohio State could beat Alabama.
I don't think that ever happens.
I mean, really,
I think that's ridiculous.
On any given Saturday, anything can happen. So I mean, yeah. Did I ever think that Auburn was going to roll into Tennessee and just woodshed them? No, but they did.
But Tennessee's not on the same playing field with Alabama.
Agree. We got to get out. Who's going to win the Heisman? We'll have your answer coming up in the next segment. UnCleated, the Bishop Media Sports Network.
Magic 105.9 presents the Southern Sports Edition Minute with Jason Bishop, the authority on Southern sports.
This Southern Sports Edition Minute is brought to you by Island Automotive. The high school football regular season came to an end Friday night, and with it, so did Brunswick's and MCA season. Brunswick lost the finale to Tiff 48-32, and MCA went down to Benedictine 56-0. Frederica was also on the losing end to Robert Toombs Christian 42-7. The Knights will be the number 2 seed and will host DEA next week in the Jungle. Glenn won their finale against Jenkins 41-20 and will be a 3 seed. The Terrors will be on the road against the 2nd seed from Region 1, which is yet to be determined. This has been your Southern Sports Edition Minute, brought to you by Island Automotive.
Pick up your copy of SSE all over the Golden Isles. The Southern Sports Edition Minute with Jason Bishop, exclusively on Magic 105.9.
When Heron Document Systems opened, a connected copier meant it was simply plugged into the wall. Well, things have changed. 30 years later, the copier is the focal point of document workflow. It's not just the printer, fax, and scanner. It's much more. In the medical office, it's integrating patient information with their electronic medical records. In the legal office, it's performing OCR, Bates stamping, and tracking expense for client billing. All of these changes over the past 30 years, and Heron Document Systems is still here. Still, providing your business with the best solution for your document and workflow pains. Every business experiences those pains, and that's okay. With Heron Document Systems, there is a better solution. Visit heronds.com for more information. Heron Document Systems in Brunswick, the efficient solution for your business.
And back, UnCleated on the Bishop Media Sports Network. Garrett Gibbs, Tyler Mitchell, Jason Bishop. So we saw Marcus Mariota go down against Stanford, which we just discussed. And I think that a lot of people had Mariota number 1 on their Heisman list. And since that loss, I've seen him slide down on those folks that were so high on him. They're no longer as high on him. They're shifting their picks to other places. So I just kind of want to kind of pose the question: who is going to win the Heisman? Garrett?
Well, the loss against Stanford, I think, unfortunately, now I say this not necessarily agreeing with it, but a loss against Stanford for Marcus Mariota and the Ducks, that hurts his case. Okay, that hurts his case, and it shouldn't, because he put up 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, and I think Tyler pointed out earlier he didn't have any interceptions. Okay, and he didn't fumble the ball. He took care of the ball. He had some, average stats for him. Because normally he's throwing 400.
He didn't score for 3 quarters.
Yeah, it sounds like you're making a case for my guy, but I don't think you are.
Well, but, at the same time, I think, Jameis Winston is going to end up, the guy just, as a true freshman, okay, coming in and just woodshedding teams like Miami, who at the time was top 10, which we talk about that,
They weren't that good.
After the loss to Virginia Tech. But they lost Duke Johnson for the year, so that hurts them big. But after the loss to Virginia Tech, that kind of hurts his case because, Miami's not a top 20 team anymore. And, but I just think, the poise that he showed and the numbers he's put up as a true freshman, I think he's your front runner right now.
Well, I can't say you're wrong. What I will say is, I don't even like to say it, Johnny Football has been playing football.
He's best player in college football.
This kid is putting up stats better than he did last year. With a few games to go, he's got 3,300 yards, 73% completion rating, 31 touchdowns, 8 rushing touchdowns, 600 rushing yards. Do I need to keep? No, I won't keep going. But what I will say is, he's killing it.
Yeah, and you compare those stats to Jameis Winston. Johnny Manziel, 3,300 yards through the air. Jameis Winston, 2,600 yards through the air. Manziel's got 31 touchdowns. Winston's got 26. Where Winston does have the advantage is he's been more careful with the football. He only has 7 interceptions, where Manziel has 11. The Bishop Media Sports Network, UnCleated, Tyler Mitchell, Garrett Gibbs, Jason Bishop. I want to make a case for Marcus Mariota still. I don't want to take him out of the running. I think that he still has a pretty decent shot of winning the thing. You look at his numbers, they're comparable. 2,500 yards, 22 touchdowns, and he has not thrown one single solitary interception the whole year. Plus, he's rushed for over 500 yards.
Yeah, he's rushed for 9 touchdowns. I mean, the kid's impressive. When you don't turn the ball over, that's saying, "Hey guys, look at me. I'm not just out here. It's not a fluke. Just like Johnny Football, it's not a fluke. This kid's done it 2 years in a row. He keeps getting better. As much as I don't like him, he is amazing. I mean, even after last year, the 37 or 3,800 yards he put up, when he's going to do that again, and that's just in the air. If it's hard to argue against his numbers. Now, granted, he's not winning as many games as some of your top quarterbacks, A.J. McCarron. I'll just mention him. But he's not putting up the stats this year. So, I mean, it's a double-edged sword. Do I want to go with McCarron that wins football games? Or do I want to go with stats? I mean, I'm thinking Johnny Manziel, his stats are just hard to argue against.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, he is leading the nation right now. Texas A&M is leading the nation right now in total offense. They have almost 6,000 yards of offense, and
he's got 4,000 of them.
Right, and he's accounting for majority of those himself. But it's the same argument with or against, depending on which side of the fence you're on. If you're going to hurt Marcus Mariota's chance because they went down, lost a tough game to Stanford, which I think Stanford dominated, then you also have to use that same logic to make the case for A.J. McCarron, who might be the only player in the history, from here on out to have 3 national championship rings. And if you're gonna take a loss to hurt a guy, you have to take the rings to help a guy.
And see, somewhere along the line that happened. And see, the thing is, you're making the argument for a body of work over a career, and that's not what the Heisman is supposed to be. The Heisman is supposed to be the best college player that particular year, regardless of how good the team is or how bad the team is. But it's no longer that. It has now become exactly what you talked about, Garrett, what a guy has done over his career in college, and if his team wins.
Right. Well, Johnny Football, he puts up a lot of points every game. Now, what I'll say against Mariota, he didn't score any points for 3 quarters. 3 quarters against Stanford. Mm-hmm. I mean, this guy's supposed to be your Heisman Trophy winner, and he can't put a point on the board. For me, that's just, that says itself. That says it all right there. I mean, the guys, you have to score points.
Well, if you're going to make that argument against Marcus Mariota, then we can make a similar, maybe not exactly the same, we can make a similar argument against Johnny Manziel. He's lost 2 games.
Yeah, he's lost the games, but he's put up the points. I mean, when he's losing games, these scores are over 40 points. It's kind of ridiculous. They give up a lot.
So you're saying
he doesn't play defense? It just so happens.
You're saying that Texas A&M is losing those games in spite of having Johnny Manziel,
right? And
so your counter argument with Mariota is they lost the game because of Mariota.
Well, I'm saying he didn't do them any justice. They didn't score points, point blank.
Well, I think the reason why is not because of Mariota. I think it's because of Stanford.
The defense was
And
good.
that very well could be.
Stanford is just, they're the Alabama of the West. Come on, man.
If we're gonna, we were talking about this in another segment about how Alex Smith doesn't make mistakes and how much of a premium and how much we value that.
Right.
If we're gonna make that argument for Alex Smith, why can we not make it for Marcus Mariota? Sure, he lost a game.
I'm not arguing.
But he hasn't turned the football over all season. He's got
not
0
arguing
turnovers.
That Alex Smith should be the MVP. That's not what I'm saying. I think he's a quarterback that I would want to have on my team. I don't need the flashiest, the biggest stats from a quarterback. I like a guy that doesn't.
Well, unfortunately, Jason, I mean, you touched on it earlier that the Heisman Trophy has become something that it shouldn't be, and with that being said, if the season ended today, then you would probably have to give the nod to Johnny Manziel.
UnCleated on the Bishop Media Sports Network. Jason Bishop, Garrett Gibbs, Tyler Manziel,
Tyler
Mitchell.
Put me in the game, coach.
So, okay, go back to your point.
Yeah, I mean, I think if this year, if you just pull stats, okay, not the best player on the best team, just the best player in college football, you'd have to go with Johnny Manziel. I mean, the guy's got 4,000 yards of offense, just like he had 5,000 something last year, and he won it. And he's going to have that this year.
And I just want to throw out this little tidbit just for reference. Tebow, when he was arguably the best college football player to have ever breathed an ounce of oxygen, arguably.
Yeah, that's debatable.
Debatable. When he won the Heisman Trophy, he had about 4,200 yards of offense. Johnny Manziel is going to surpass that. It's not even going to be close.
No, it ain't.
Now, I don't know the comparisons as far as touchdowns went with Tebow. I'm sure he had a lot of touchdowns. But, right now where we stand, Johnny's got 39 touchdowns on his back.
By himself.
Yeah, that's just this season.
And so then I think, and of course, this is what the argument's supposed to be. Where is this individual's football team if he's not on it? You take Johnny Manziel away from Texas A&M, they win, 3 games?
Yeah, I'm thinking they're a 3-game. They're a 3-game.
If that, I mean, I think Saturday they struggled against Mississippi State. They gave up 41 to Mississippi State. Okay, their defense is like, I hate to say it, dog fans out there, but they're like y'all. I mean, they have no defense, and without Johnny Manziel scoring 50, they lose.
Yeah, he's their running back and their quarterback.
So who's in a worse position of our candidates? If Jameis Winston's not on Florida State, are they in a worse position? Is Texas A&M in a worse position without Manziel, or is Oregon in a worse position without Mariota?
I think the only argument you can make for FSU is that their defense would win them some games that but they would definitely be worse without Winston.
Of course. So,
but I still think
would
be 8 or 9 games still.
Okay, so Florida State would be in better position than Texas A&M.
They have a defense that can score.
Okay, so who would be in a worse position between Mariota and Manziel?
You mean as the team?
As the team.
I definitely would go with Manziel's team would be in
a
way worse position.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, Mariota doesn't turn the ball over. He scored 31 touchdowns so far this season. That's a lot of points.
I think it's arguable because I think that those teams are so similar. They don't play defense, and they rely so heavily on their quarterbacks to carry them.
Right.
So I think an argument can be made both ways for Manziel and for Mariota.
It's probably a toss-up.
Well, and with Mariota, they've lost one. With Manziel, A&M has lost 2. So,
and that's a great point. So if they're losing a couple with him.
Okay, well we're up against our break. We got to get out really quick. Going around the table. Who wins the Heisman?
I'm still going to go with Winston.
Garrett, I disagree. I'm going with old Johnny Football.
I'm going to pick Marcus Mariota.
Yeah, good.
All right,
we got 3
good luck, fellas. Let's wager a dinner bet.
All right, sounds good. Actually, how about a 6-pack of beer? All right, we got to get out. This is UnCleated on the Bishop Media Sports Network.